What is going on, Clipper people, Clipper fan, Clipper folks? Your Los Angeles Clippers are in the playoffs, officially clinched the 5th seed. I know Charles Mockler and Adam Oslin had you on the double dip after that, the most victorious of dubs. But today we are going to be talking about the Clippers, the end of the regular season, of course, 5th in the Western Conference there. We're going to talk about PG and his availability, as well as look ahead to preview the Suns, talk about some main themes for that one, kind of where we're at right now. We'll give you much more detailed breakdown sort of as this week progresses. We hope to bring you at least two, maybe three more shows before that playoff series actually starts. If you didn't know already, we are Clips and Dip, a Clippers podcast. You can find us at Clippers Pod on Twitter and Clippers Podcast on YouTube. I am but 1/3 of the victorious hosting triumphant here, joined as always by Charles Mockler and Adam Oslin. Adam, let me kick it over to you. You're sipping on a Kool-Aid. I'm assuming you're drinking the Clippers Kool-Aid. How's it going today, my friend?
You know that. No rat poison in here, guys. I'm good to go. I feel good. I'm glad that we now know the Clippers' opponent, and yesterday's stressful day of NBA games and scoreboard watching is finally over. I was, I got this crick in my neck from just like having it on a swivel all day yesterday. I'm looking back and forth, the Clippers game, the Minnesota Pelicans game, and I thought that was going to ending before the Clippers game. Didn't go that way. It's Clippers versus the Suns, which most people had coming into the week last week. So we got it. Chuck, what's up?
I'm doing okay. That was some stressful basketball to take place at noon 2 days in a row. I didn't really like that. I was feeling a little pessimistic kind of Sunday afternoon after that game, just because, I guess you would have liked to see a little bit better process or something like that. But hey, we're playing the Suns. I have said how matchup-wise, play style-wise, this is not the worst matchup for the Clippers. Maybe the rosters are a little different heading into this, but I don't know. I'm feeling okay. I think we got a couple days for me to really get worked into a stress.
I mean, I think that dovetails perfectly into where I think we're going to start this off, which is, how do you guys feel about this? The Clippers, a lot of it was out of their control, but I did see on Twitter there are some people who have been a little bit critical of the Clippers' decision to quote unquote pick this matchup by of course winning a game. I kind of said it, and you said you were watching games and stuff yesterday. I'm sure Clippers and their analytics department, I think that they can afford League Pass for those folks, so I'm sure that they had a couple of games turned on as well. But I don't know. I don't think. I guess where I'm at right now is that this seemed like the most likely of scenarios. Looking at the matchup versus the Kings, I don't see that being overwhelmingly a favorite matchup. I think the biggest reason for the Clippers, if you were to cherry pick this matchup, would be for the second round for those sort of sakes. But maybe the calculations on that have even changed, with Denver sort of flopping a little bit of an anemic end to the season for them. But where are you guys at? Are you disappointed? Do you wish things could have broken out a little bit differently? Would either of you have greatly have preferred to see the Kings in the first round versus this Suns team?
I just to go back to what Adam coughed earlier, it just was impossible for the Clippers to pick their seed. Like that Minnesota Pels game, there's a clip where Ty Lue asks somebody on the bench what the score of the game is, and someone's like, Minnie's up 1, and he's like, what? Well, that doesn't help us at all. We even had a delay in this game because a speaker was broken to try and get this game to go longer. I don't know. It is what it is. I mean, yeah, no, let's do it. Let's play it. Let's play the Suns. The Kings, I don't want anything to do with that home court advantage. It's just going to be an absurd. Games 1 and 2 in Sacramento are going to be just insane. No, we needed the win, and dude, if we would have lost this game, what a nightmare! Just genuinely, even if we were trying to, that just would have left a shitty taste in my mouth. I think
the margins for error between 6 and 7 were just too slim, and with the way the tiebreakers and stuff that sort of would have fallen out.
We could have been 9th.
It just didn't really it didn't really seem worth it, because I think 5 rather, even having to take on the Suns in the first round, to me is a lot better than 7. But
what do you mean by that?
Where are you at, Adam?
Well, especially because 7 meant you were taking on the Lakers again, who they just played. I don't know, 12th time might be the charm for the Lakers against the Clippers in that scenario. And the game up in Minnesota against the Pelicans ended 10 minutes after the Clippers-Suns game was over. So, I mean, get the no regrets tattoo. It wasn't going to happen. That ship had sailed. You couldn't toy around with that ball game. Yeah, there was a point early in the fourth quarter when Minnesota was up by 5, and I started to think to myself, maybe they're leaving Mason Plumlee in here for a reason and not putting Ivica Zubac back in. Maybe Daniel Oturu is going to show up out of nowhere, put the cape on, the tank cape on. But there's no reason to look back at this point. This is where they ended up based on 82 games during the regular season. Yes, the games at the end of the year are more magnified. So you start to look at those more closely and say, what if this just happened? What if that just happened? Forget about it. The Clippers are where they're supposed to be. This is what they earned, the 5 seed in a bad year in the Western Conference.
Well, and really, that's the big thing, right? Is Clippers had limited control over their own destiny in a certain sense in this, right? You know, you can't control really other teams' wins and losses when you're not playing them. And I think, given everything that happened, we thought this team would be a top 4 seed coming into the season. For them to still be in the 4 or 5 matchup, given everything that happened. Yes, I know the opponent that you're looking at, but at the same time, I mean, it's about who this team said they were all season long about, right? It was like somewhere in sort of that middle of the pack in the West. So it feels a little bit like, yes, some things could have broken differently, but like realistically, this was about as high as they could have gotten and as low as they could have gotten, I think is a recipe for them to possibly miss the playoffs entirely.
If you want to look back and have some regrets, it was losing those close games right out of the All-Star break. You lose to Sacramento by 176 to 175. You lose to them again in a close 1-point game. The game in Denver, they had opportunities there. They still went 11-10 the last 21 games post All-Star break, so 21 games with Russell Westbrook. But there were some games in there that were obviously very winnable that it looked like they were going for. But this is maybe the most appropriate way for the Clippers. If they were ever going to win a championship, wouldn't they have to take the harder route? Like, this team can't do it the easy way. It would have to be something like this where they have to exercise demons against the team that took them out in the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago and the team that came back on them down 3-1 in the bubble that has beaten them, 9 straight times in the Denver Nuggets. Like, maybe this will sharpen their iron. Maybe this is the challenge, and this is the only way to get this team's attention, to be taking on a Phoenix Suns team that also added Kevin Durant now. And it looks like for at least the start of the series, they'll be without Paul George.
Well, and you were talking, Adam, you had a great tweet on Sunday where you were like, can someone give the Suns players some yellow and gold jerseys so the Clippers can get up for this game? Like that, this team is a team that needs like not just a fire lit under their ass, but like in a whole pallets setup of fire lit under their ass. You know what I mean? Like they need so much motivation. It feels like to be like, let's give it 110%.
And I mean, unless we forget the massive advantage the Clippers carved out for themselves the last time they tried to play cute in the standings, they found themselves in an 0-2 deficit at the top of every single series they played. So I don't know that, playing the Kings makes that better. I honestly, Charles talked a little bit about that home environment in Sacramento and the fact that they are, a younger team. They like to push the pace. They're a problematic matchup for the Clippers. I think that's another
the
scenario
best half court offense since
let's say you wake up this morning and you avoid the Suns in the first round. I still think there's a very high likelihood that you're looking at an 0-2 series coming home.
There were no good options out there. If the Kings go on to beat the Golden State Warriors in the first round, if Sacktown actually beats the Warriors, I think a lot of people are going to change their tune on that. But then what I see happening is The Lakers are going to win tomorrow night, and they're going to bounce Memphis in the first round. And that means that second round opponent would have been against the Los Angeles Lakers if they took that other route against Sacramento first and would be able to get by them.
But that's so many like that. Like if Paul George was healthy, sure. But like there's so like I said last time we were all together, it's the seat of our pants year. Like we're just going by the seat of our pants. And like I'm trying to not even think about the second round, if I'm being honest.
The only team with maybe more question marks in terms of solidifying an identity, you could say, is the Phoenix Suns of top contenders. The Clippers may have met their match in that category of playing a team that also hasn't exactly crystallized as being the juggernaut we thought they would be, even though they're 8-0 with KD. Look at the games they had played. Look at the teams they had beat. What's their best victory? Against the Dallas Mavericks, who then fell out of the playoff or postseason picture completely. They beat OKC. They beat Minnesota. They almost lost to Denver, who was playing nobody, just like the Clippers almost lost to Phoenix and Portland, who was playing nobody recently. So both teams, I think, are scrambling to figure out exactly what they have while taking each other on in a first-round series where the loser is going to be extremely disappointed on how this season went.
Yeah, unless it's a good Dame audition, and then it's like God.
This guys are still pushing it. So we got some extended time. The Clippers get some time to practice. What are we looking for them to kind of work on in this practice? Like, who do we think's playing well? Who needs to pick it up? Like, as Doc Rivers talked about all the time, it's the most scouted league in the NBA. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of new wrinkles, considering we're down a guy. And two, we don't know what's happening with Morris. But like, what are you hoping they kind of work on? This next basically week or so?
I mean, really just solidifying things on the offensive end where we're minimizing those turnovers. I think if we're not our own worst enemy on that end of the floor, and to that end, I really hope that we are sort of working out how these rotations are going to go as much as you possibly can in a practice. Right. This is a team that, I mean, I think we've only had like 2 head-to-head matchups pre-All-Star break with full strength Suns. There might have been a third one in there at the very opening of the season. I'm not positive. But it's one of those things where these aren't things that a lot of Clippers rotations aren't battle tested, and any changes that we have. Right. I mean, it'd be nice to not have to start exercising those in an 0-2 situation against the Suns. So I'm kind of looking at a couple of games as sort of like the prototype for this for me. And one is that last game against the Suns pre-All-Star break where Terrence Mann was absolutely out of his mind. And in that same mold, sort of what we were able to get from Russ in that matchup versus the Lakers. I really thought that Ty Lue's rotations were on a string there in terms of the guards.
He made great calls. Yeah.
And getting the most out of everybody on that roster, and certainly, Russ included in that as well. So I think those are the 2 games that if they're looking back at tape on as far as what they can do, not necessarily, scouting an opponent, because completely different teams here in both of these scenarios, but looking internally, those are the types of things that I would be looking to sort of that I would be looking to emulate.
I'm excited to see, and you brought up the turnovers. They're 26th post All-Star break with 14.9 per game. That's certainly an area that has to be cleaned up this week. The last 2 first halves were abysmal when it came to just intensity and effort in rotations out there and communication defensively. They've been 20th post All-Star break defensively. On the season, they finished 17th defensively. They weren't good. The only discernible area where you could say the Clippers, and correct me if I'm wrong, I may not have thought through it enough, but the only area you could say that they were a lead in at all this season was 3-point shooting. Sure. And I think they ended up
of the 2-1-3 era.
Yeah. And that, if you're trying to, put together an identity for this team and who they are when they're at their best, they're creating a lot of ball movement and knocking down 3-pointers along the perimeter. And that's something that they can rely on. And I do remember, as much as we talk about this team not having a lot of continuity and so many different changes and things, a lot of the core has still been together for a while. They've been in and out of being out there on the court together. But Coach Lue brought this up earlier in the season, maybe midway point, actually. It's not like we haven't had a lot of these same guys in the building together for a while. Right. Maybe that's an advantage they have over the Phoenix Suns compared to them just bringing in Kevin Durant. Now, he's a plug-and-play superstar, as everyone likes to say. He's amazing and can fit in anywhere. But I haven't seen the smoothness to their offense that I would have expected, even in a limited amount of time because he got injured with a freaky ankle injury. Mm-hmm. It just looked like they still had a lot to figure out offensively, where guys were thinking through the offense instead of just reading and reacting and playing instinctual because they've been on the court together for a long time. They don't have that built-in chemistry quite yet. Could they figure it out in the playoffs, or they just have enough high-end talent that it doesn't matter? Maybe. But sure, the Clippers may have a slight advantage, where I wouldn't be thinking this against pretty much any other team, identity-wise against the Phoenix Suns now with Kevin Durant.
Yeah, I like what Will brought up about Russ and Mann, because our bench guards, we're going to talk about a little bit in the next segment, but like our bench guards have a chance to win a couple games for us in this series, right? Like Norm has been fantastic, 79 total points in his last 3 games, and that's going 1 of 9 from 3. So he's hitting a pretty nice stride, at least not from shooting outside perspective. Terrence, we're going to see some 3-guard lineups, right? Like Ty Lue's been running 3-guard lineups any chance that he possibly gets. So those Russ Terrence minutes, we saw some good stuff earlier in the season when we saw it sometimes. And now I would hope that Terrence's minutes increase. I don't know if the rotation is going to shorten up just because that's, Ty Lue's kind of plugging and playing and seeing what works. But we need guys to pound the glass from the guard position, which Terrence and Russ can do. And then, like Adam, you said, we need guys to distribute, which both those guys can do. Obviously, Russ a little bit better than Terrence in that regard. But, like, that's why I was a little bummed by this weekend, because there was we saw flashes of good process, right? Like, we saw a couple minutes of, they're really giving it to him, like second half versus the Blazers. That was great. I think they rattled off like 7-0 or 9-0 or something like that. And it was like, this is like a hyped up, into it, ready to engage Clippers team. I wish we would have seen it for like 6 minutes together over this weekend, but the pieces are there. So I'm cautiously pessimistic, I guess. I don't know.
What's going to be interesting seeing this team now with the stakes, where apparently they wanted them all season long, where it seemed like they had one eye looking towards the future in the playoffs.
Right.
Are they consistently inconsistent, or were they during the regular season because they just weren't that engaged or disinterested at times, or are they just not that good? And we're going to find out really quick.
Damn.
Rubber is meeting road. Because look, they ended up almost a bottom 10 defense. They were basically a top 10 offense on the season, but that's a sample size of 82 games. It's hard to gauge this team because there have been so many different iterations and versions and lineups and rotations and injuries happening that have forced all those different things to occur out there on the court. But I lean towards the potential is all still there if they put it together. And look, if they win this first round series over the Phoenix Suns, the MVP is probably going to have to be Coach Lue and not a player. It's probably going to have to be Coach Lue pushing all the right buttons and living up to him being this tactician and strategist and thinking 3 moves ahead of his opponent in a 7-game series. He said being in a playoff series is his happy place. He's there now.
God, I hope so. Yeah, one player that I was looking at who I'm hoping can get some nice just consistency found or something in this first series is Batum. Batum is a very good defensive player for the Clippers. We're going to see him guard probably DeAndre Ayton at some point. But if you look at the last 10 games, Batum's plus-minus is just a bit up and down. You got -4, +9, +13, +2, 0, -8, plus 22, -6, plus 34, -7. So we're getting kind of some up and down-ness. And I know part of this is from Ty Lue just being like, Nico doesn't have it tonight. We're going to give him like 16 minutes or something and then kind of let the other hot hands go. But Nick Batum is going to be very important in this series for the Clippers. He's probably the most important like basketball player, not just a scorer, not just an offensive guy. But for the Clippers, other than, Kawhi, he's probably the most important starter in that kind of all-around sense for the Clips. So I'm excited for him to get some rest and get some practice reps in just so, he can start feeling a little bit more confident.
Batum's big. Consistency from him would go a long way with this team. Not just being able, we expect him to be good defensively.
Right.
And he was at times the last 2 games for them. But he's been so up and down with shooting variance all season long. And I want to say he still finished around 39% from the outside. You just look at that and go, oh, it was still a solid year from him. But it was always feast or famine. It was him hitting 7 3-pointers or going 0 for 7 from the outside. And I misspoke earlier. I was talking post All-Star break. The Clippers were basically a top 10 offense. You want to know where they finished offensively and defensively, ratings-wise, on the season? 17th offensively, 17th defensively. That's what they were. So if anything, for a team to be a 5 seed, finishing closer to
below average,
bottom half of the league in both of those categories, it's kind of shocking that they did end up a 5 seed, but things were that tight down the stretch, and I guess it makes a little bit of sense because of that. But yeah, Nicholas Batum is going to have to be imperative because he's going to be guarding KD along with Kawhi, I'm guessing, to start ball games off. Those two are going to be switching back and forth, and Batum probably starts on him so Kawhi can get going offensively. He doesn't have to worry about it till more crucial moments later in games or when they try to get a switch and, we just switched on to Kawhi Leonard.
Right. Yeah, that is a good call. Will, did you listen to Podcast P? We got to talk about the Paul George update.
No, I didn't.
So there was a teaser that the Podcast P Twitter account tweeted out on Sunday that was like, what did it say? Something
like
basically
update.
Yeah, tomorrow on Podcast P, PG drops an exclusive update on his recovery. Which, hey, new to the podcast game, you're trying to drum up engagement. This makes total sense. You got the player giving an exclusive update on his injury. And then Shams just spoiled it like 2 hours before the podcast came out. He tweeted out Clipper star Paul George is expected to be sidelined to begin the first round playoff series against the Suns, but is making some tangible progress from his March 21st knee injury. So if you're a Clippers fan, you kind of knew this was coming. I don't think anyone believed there was going to be any substantial injury timeline given by Paul George on his podcast from a team like the Clippers. Bad promoing. That's all I'm going to say. Bad promoing.
I take a lot of encouragement out of this because he could have said, Shams or PG could have said, likely not Paul George, that he's likely going to be out the first round. Because remember, before the report was, and this came from Andrew Greif, thinking he'll be back for the first round is optimistic. Now it's down to beginning the first round seems to be unlikely. But I would not be shocked, and maybe this is just because I'm optimistic and sanguine, that if they were down 0-2 heading back to LA, that he played in game 3 or 4 and jump back in midway through the series. I wouldn't be shocked if that happened.
I think it depends on the rest schedule, right? Like, I think if we get a bunch of days in between like 1 and 2, like sometimes there's like 3 days in between game 1 and 2. I think that's possible, but he's just not doing any on-court stuff. Like, he's just not, I don't know. Will, how do you feel about
nearly
this?
a week? I mean, is a lot of time. I will say,
Yeah.
like in the grand scheme of an injury, he's.
And we're just at 3 weeks, right? We're like, we're just at 3 weeks since it happened.
Maybe
Close.
tomorrow or Wednesday is 3 weeks.
We're close. Okay. So are you on Adam's positivity island for PG coming back halfway through the series?
Let's build that fire, baby.
I think it's possible.
Okay.
Someone brought up a good point. When I posted the conversation earlier at Follow Adam A and what he said about it and not giving an exact timeline, that was recorded, it sounds like last Thursday. They played the Lakers Wednesday night. They were talking about that game, and it sounded like it was a morning podcast when they recorded it. Paul George said one of the reasons he wasn't going to the games yet was because he needed to elevate his knee. He needed to elevate his leg. Well, a couple days later, against the Portland Trailblazers on Saturday, he was at the game. So that already changed just the way he was going through the treatment then. I'm taking encouraging signs out of that.
All right. They're hyped up. Did you listen to the podcast? Did it get you to listen to Podcast P?
I've listened to every one so far. I know a lot of people were mocking it at first. They're like, oh, is Paul George that big of a personality? Or going to be that interesting? I think most people have been pleasantly surprised. I think it's been really good, actually. His breakdowns and assessments of players and guys and legends of the game, and Kobe being his favorite, and the stories that he gives, they're pretty interesting. They're good. I'd recommend it, honestly. I wouldn't say I'd recommend it at this point. If it was bad, I would just not talk about it as much and be like, well, we're taking away some news from it, even though there was no news really. But right. I think the podcast is about an hour long. I think they do a good job moving topic to topic and asking the right questions.
I will say this podcast has 3 hosts. All of a sudden, Paul George comes out with a podcast. 3 hosts. I don't know. Something to it. I'll have to give it another shot. The first episode, I thought it was fine. Coming up, we're going to be talking kind of the series preview, some major themes on offense, some major themes on defense, and then we're going to talk who has the most pressure as well as some predictions. We got ads coming up, so if those have been too loud for you, go ahead and turn it down. We got ads coming up in 3, 2, 1. What is going on? Welcome back to episode 131 of Clips and Dip, talking that Suns Clippers preview. Will, we're talking major themes on offense from the Clippers. What are you looking for? What do we need to establish? How can we pull off this upset? Because as of right now, it would be an upset.
Look, I mean, I do think a big thing is going to be like the variancy in threes for both teams, right? Because these teams both are around league average in attempts from deep. The Clippers have been slightly more efficient. So if that holds, that does bode well for the Clippers. Look, the Suns have been the better paint defense than the Clippers have. But the Clippers do hold an advantage at the line when they are managing to get into the paint and get to the rim. Post All-Star break, free throw attempts for both of these teams. Suns are at around 22. Clips are about 25. So a 15% advantage there. Nearly identical percentages. But like if they are able to win these games, it's going to be on the margins like that, right? Like who can stay consistent, from deep, who is going to be able to take advantage at the line. Especially, if the Suns, if you can get them to settle for those mid-range shots and defend without fouling, that is one of those little areas where maybe the Clippers could eke out a bit of an advantage. And when it comes to getting to the line, I do think that there is something to be said for Russ in that department.
Yes, that's a good call. And Norm, right? Like Norm really helped us out in these back-to-back games when we needed to shore up, specifically first quarters, against those, kind of lesser rosters that we were playing. So I think that's a great point. And the free throw shooting was bad for the Clippers to end the season. I think with a week off, they're going to be fine. I think a back-to-back in the afternoons is kind of like the worst recipe for free throw shooting for a team like the Clippers. So I think we'll see more of those fall. I just hope that whistle continues for Norm specifically. I think Russ will get the calls. But I'm interested to see if Norm has built up some of that clout.
Yeah, and look, the Suns weren't a juggernaut in any area. They may have been had they had Kevin Durant all season long, but this wasn't the team this season that won 64 games the year before. They weren't humming and running on all cylinders throughout the year. They had their own ups and downs. They had their own injury issues. I think CP3 and Devin Booker both missed around 30 games. They finished 7th defensively, but just 14th offensively. Post All-Star break, they were 10th in both of those categories, offensive and defensive rating. So they were a little bit more consistent there. 8 games with Kevin Durant. I like what Will said about the three-point shooting. If the Clippers are going to win this series, they have to be the better team from beyond the arc to counter some of the ridiculous efficiency we're going to see from the mid-range mafia with the Phoenix Suns. Because it's not just Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. Obviously, Chris Paul can also knock them down at the right elbow with regularity. And those can just be, debilitating, back-breaking type of shots because as we know with Kawhi Leonard, sometimes it doesn't matter what you do defensively. If it's a mid-range shot, those guys are so dialed in from there. So the Clippers got to counter those tough twos to defend with some big threes and get into the paint. I mean, they're going to have to play more of the analytics game of getting easy layups and three-pointers. The Suns don't get into the paint a lot. That's not what they do. When it came out and they were arguing about that game against the Lakers, not getting many free throws, it was 40-20 or something like that. People looked up the analytics and it's like, oh, they take the fewest amount of shots at the rim
Right.
in the league or somewhere in that category. So they're not great at that. And the Clippers have gotten much better since they brought in Russell Westbrook with their paint attack and getting downhill and playing more to their philosophy of get to the paint or die trying. They finished 3rd overall in the season, 3-point shooting wise, but that's because they got really hot over the last 2 months post All-Star break. They also finished 3rd there, but they improved as the year went along. And we saw that last season too. They ended up being the best 3-point shooting team post All-Star break last year after getting off to a slower start. So some of their principles started to generate out there on the court. The stuff that Coach Lue was preaching was starting to happen a little bit more. But, yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be really difficult. The margin of error is going to be very slim. But I think that three-point shooting is going to be as critical as anything for this Clippers team in this series.
Who do we think – obviously, we need Kawhi Leonard to continue to play at his otherworldly level that he's been on the last couple months. Other than Kawhi – Will, I'll go to you first. Who were the 2 most important offensive players after Kawhi for the Clippers to get at least a split these first couple games in Phoenix?
Well, I mean, that one's kind of tough because while I want to say Norm Powell, I don't know that Norm Powell performing well offensively is necessarily going to mean a win for the Clippers. I mean, him performing poorly offensively will certainly mean a loss.
Contribute to a loss, yeah.
But just because of, the way those lineups and it's not all just due to Norm, it is sometimes to the personnel due around him. Those bench units aren't always lighting it up. We have seen some more success with like the bench lineups plus Kawhi. So Norm to me is like a question mark 2 up there. I mean, it is like foolish. I know it's a little bit foolish for me to not just outright include him, but I just like it's with the caveat that I don't know that Norm scoring well necessarily always translates to winning. I am going to say I am going to say Eric Gordon. I think that if he has a great series offensively and continues to provide what he has been able to on the defensive end, I think that could really go a long way for the Clippers. And then I'm also going to say, and like, I don't expect him to be a top 3 leading scorer, but in terms of offensive production resulting in wins, I'm going to have to go ahead and go Nico Batum too. So those would be the 2 like surefires for me, with Norm being like a question mark 3rd. And once again, I'm not saying that that Norm can have
Norm
a bad,
disrespect from.
I'm not saying that Norm can have a bad offensive series and we can expect to win this one. I'm just saying that I don't think that he needs to be a top 2 or 3 scorer for the Clippers to necessarily get a win with this one, if you catch my drift.
And you're leaving Russ off.
The Russ to me, it's kind of like I said in the last thing. Like I think that there are absolutely going to be points where we can utilize Russ in the way that he is best offensively. I just don't know throughout a total series if that's the hope. I don't really know that that's a recipe for success.
Interesting. So that was my thing. I was going to say Russ has to be the second most important player. Not because I necessarily want him to be, but because of the way the team has decided to construct the roster and how we play since getting him. right?
So most important, I think, is interesting. I was talking in terms of like offensive production, but most important, I mean, yeah, you would hope that he's up there in that top 3.
Yeah, if he's going to be second or third in field goal attempts, it's like, Adam, where are you at? And don't say John Wall.
Russ, is he still playoff eligible?
Wait, let me pull it up.
I think Russ would be the fast track or the quickest answer to a series win. Like if you could just count on Russ for an efficient 25 every game,
that would be phenomenal.
Then the Clippers are winning this series. I just don't expect him to be anything different than what he's been throughout a lot of his career. And unfortunately, he's really been up and down and has struggled mightily since 2017 on in the playoffs. He's only had a couple of series where he has shot over 40% during that time. So I expect him to be up and down. He'll have his good moments. He'll have his bad moments. So I'm not going to put him as one of my 2 guys because I almost feel like I know what I'm going to get from Russ. I think Norman Powell has to give you an efficient 20 per game for them to have a chance to win this series. And I think he's more than capable of doing it. I don't want to put all the pressure on him. But coming into the season, I said a bunch. I don't think it's going to take long for most people to realize he's the 3rd most important player on this team. And there have been times and stretches where that's looked true. January, February, what he was doing out there. But he was still a 6th man coming off the bench and not necessarily playing huge minutes out there, not necessarily always being in closing lineups. And I get what Will's saying too, is because he can score a lot and you could still lose because he could get burned on the other end. Right. The one thing I noticed, though, the last couple of games was, especially in the second half, he's been playing, and in that Lakers game, really, he played much better defense than we have seen all season long. That's been an area I've been disappointed with him. Overall, he's had a very good year, but defensively, he hasn't played to his level or his capabilities. He hasn't been the guy he was in Portland at times or the guy he was in Toronto. And to me, it just looks like he's just not as locked in and focused. He has long arms. He's a smaller guy, but he was known as being a solid, somewhat plus defender at least. And I expect him to be that now in their biggest moment without Paul George, at least to start the series, because he's that talented. He can do it. And the way he's been turning the corner and blowing past guys and getting to the basket over and over again, even while struggling from the outside the last 3 games, has been big. He's got to shoot himself out of that funk from the perimeter, but he can get one shot hot. Like, it doesn't take long for Norm to get it going. He's his own worst enemy. He talked about it, I think it was after the Lakers game. You don't want to be Angry Norm. That's one of his nicknames out there because he gets into his own head because he's such a perfectionist. And when he's not playing well, you know, it boils over, and then all of a sudden he's not looking for a pass from Nicholas Batum because he's arguing with a referee, or he's trying too hard to get fouls and press the issue a little bit too much there instead of just taking what the defense is giving him. So he's number 2 behind Kawhi Leonard to me in this series of just, he has to be great or I don't think they can win this series. 3 is more of an X factor wild card to me.
Feels like it's hot hand almost. It feels like 3 is Ty Lue picking the right hot hand for that night.
I think because we're talking offense, so I think a lot of people wouldn't think of him in this category because he hasn't really done it for a sustained period of time. But Terrence Mann, if Terrence Mann has a moment, if he has a series where we call it the Terrence Mann series, where it's not just one game, he only averaged 10 points against Utah in that second round series, but he had 39 in that one game. And he had games here and there. But I think he's got to average closer to 15 against the Phoenix Suns.
All right.
Because if he is, we talked about the 3-point shooting, I think that means he's going to be knocking them down from the outside. And for his career now, as much as people talk about Terrence Mann, oh, he's getting better in this area or whatnot, he's a 38% shooter from the outside. That's what he has been in his career. He can do it. So if he's shooting well from the outside and making them pay when they're sagging off of him and doubling and blitzing Kawhi Leonard out there in big moments in the second half or down the stretch in the fourth quarter, should Coach Lue go with Terrence Mann? Because if his offense is there, he's got to ride him. he's got to go with him late in games because the defense is going to be there, and he's done a really good job against Chris Paul. I feel like over the years he's frustrated him some.
Sure.
Yeah. So if his offense is there, and I'm just talking about close to around 15 points per game, nothing too crazy,
Right.
but it would be, it would show a lot of growth and development, and it could be a breakout type of series for Terrence Mann should he give him that offensively. And I think they might have to have it to beat Phoenix.
I think that's a good call. What about the other side of the ball? Will, on defense, what are we looking for the Clippers? Other than, maybe open the game with a little more intensity than they did this last weekend on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, I mean, I talked about it a little bit in the offensive segment, but the Suns have been a much better paint defense than the Clippers have. Post All-Star break, so they played, I think Kevin Durant played in a third of these games, 8 of the 22 or 23 or whatever.
Right.
But post All-Star break, the Suns were a top 6 paint defense. They allowed opponents about 48 points per game in the paint. Clippers 26th, coughing up about 56 points in the paint per game. So that's one of those things that they, that they really need to key in on. And I think eliminating, DeAndre Ayton is a guy who, won't always press the issue. If he's guarded up by a larger defender, that takes away easy points off the board. The thing with the mid-range mafia is like some of those shots that you're settling for, if you're not getting to the paint, you're not creating the best look on the floor. And I think one of those things to look at is, you look at Kevin Durant's playoff history. That last year in Brooklyn, that was his worst playoffs since his first year with OKC. He averaged 26 points a game, sure, but I believe he shot 39% from the floor and 33% from three. And Jason Tatum was his primary defender. I think he defended him through 4 games. Looks like a total of around 30 minutes, 130 plus possessions. He held Durant to 3 of 18. And I think you might have a defender who could probably do something a little bit better on this Clippers roster.
Let's go.
I actually, to that point, I saw this stat earlier. This was Kawhi on Durant back in 2017, the Zaza Pachulia dirty play against Kawhi Leonard, where they changed the rule.
Yeah.
In that one game, when the Spurs were up by 20 early on and Kawhi was going otherworldly on the offensive end, he defended Durant on 24 plays. KD attempted just 5 shots and scored just 4 points. After he went down.
In that offense, too? Like, that's insane.
With the Warriors.
Yeah.
After Kawhi left that game, Durant scored 20 points in 15 minutes. So I've always felt like Kawhi is the better player than Kevin Durant for a lot of different reasons. Kevin Durant's amazing. He's the more effortless scorer. It looks prettier from him. He's one of the greatest players of all time. But I've always been in the camp of, I think Kawhi Leonard's better. Just overall, a slightly better player. And he's done it as the number 1 option on a championship team. You can say KD won those finals MVPs with the Golden State Warriors, fine. But don't act like he wasn't hiding behind that offense and Steph Curry flexing his muscles. Like, it made everything so much easier for him. He may have been the most talented player on that team, but they already had a system in place. Kawhi Leonard, 2014, San Antonio Spurs, definitely the number 1 guy on both ends. 2019 with the Toronto Raptors, same way. And yeah, they probably don't beat the Golden State Warriors, who are just overpowered if KD doesn't go down, if Klay Thompson doesn't go down. But still, I think Kawhi Leonard is a better lead dog number 1 option on a championship team.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Let's talk some quick depth stuff. Ty's kind of been putting Zoo stagger with the bench a little bit more and Nick Batum stagger with the bench a little more. And I'm hoping that helps our rebounds out. Suns are 7th in offensive rebounds. Clippers are 16th in defensive rebounds since we got Russ. So I'm hoping that can, something get figured out there. Also, do we think Morris returns? Is he done? Like, there's no updates, obviously, from what we've heard. It's not like the team is actually making him very readily available to speak to media, which I think does make sense. But, like, Is he just done? Is this the playoff rotation? I don't want to say that. I don't know. It's just weird. Like,
I think if they were down 0-2 and the starters weren't performing well out of the gates, he could try Marcus Morris. I think it's possible Coach Lue went to him or would go to him.
Will?
I just think it depends on how he looks.
Yeah.
We did see some better defensive stuff from Morris that our last run before Kawhi went down. I certainly don't think that he's capable of returning to that point.
Sure.
But if he's in a well enough state where you can at least keep somebody in front of him defensively, even if it's in a more diminished role, and he still does. He provides the threat of that spacing and an extra an extra dimension of offensive ability. I'm not going to say that it's impossible. I would be shocked if he returned in any sort of starting role. But I have hope. I have hope at least that there is a path where he could play some more effective but much more limited stints. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not going to handicap it. But I don't think we see him return with the starters. I'm not ready to completely rule it out any appearance at all.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's going to be very weird. It's just a kind of a weird end to his season if it is the last. You got the COVID, and then you got the back stuff. It's odd. All right, coming up next, we are going to be talking pressure and predictions, surprise player of the series. We got ads coming up, so if those have been too loud for you, go ahead and turn it down. We got ads coming up, and then talking pressure in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back in Clips and Dip, episode 131 here. If you need to get to us, we're at Clippers Pod on Twitter. Clippers Podcast is where you can find us on YouTube, and you can see our faces. These guys have glasses. I don't, if you're trying to figure out who's who. Plus, we have our name tags next to us. But the amazing artwork as well that should always be celebrated.
Yes.
And his name slips my mind at the moment. Give him a shout out, Chuck.
At LOLWTF Eric on Twitter. I think he's at the same thing at Instagram. Eric Bui, fantastic Clippers artist. He's been making the year a lot more fun with his apparently, I don't think they're called lazy drawings, but they look better than
good vibes,
janky drawings. And it's like, okay, if this is your janky drawing, his regular artwork is fantastic as well. So shout out Eric.
He's the real MVP. It ain't KD. It ain't his mom. It's him. Okay, guys. I see on the rundown here themes offensively for this team.
That was the last segment.
And that was the last segment.
I'm happy that you're
in case you guys missed that, go back about 10 minutes here.
This was Adam's first peek at the rundown for the episode.
He goes, whoa, we do these?
Thanks to Chuck Mockler for putting it together. So
sure,
we could talk pressure talk because we're just talking about Marcus Morris. The one thing that does happen sometimes is a player gets a clean slate come playoff time because legacies are made in the playoffs. Everything is more magnified. And somebody like Marcus Morris, who has had a very up and down and then down, down, down second half of the season, if he got into a ball game and hit a big shot, nobody would care. Nobody would remember any of that stuff. So you wonder who has more pressure in this series, team-wise and player-wise. I think the Clippers have more pressure overall as a team. I know they're not the favorites, but this is year 4 of an experiment, and the Suns just brought in Kevin Durant.
That's a really good way to look at it. Kind of old experiment versus young experiment between these two teams. I think you're totally right, especially if you're a Clippers fan. It's like if you're the Suns, you're supposed to beat the Clippers, right? Like that's just how it is.
So
you're going the other way?
Opposite. I would say the Suns have the most to prove in this series. I mean, the Clippers, they're gonna take a bruising from online commentators or whatever. Should this result in a Clippers first round bounce, which of course is more than possible. And yes, the Suns haven't had this put together for long, but I feel like I just keep saying this every year in this iteration of the Suns, like. Chris Paul plus 1 year to me doesn't equal a team like being any better. You're on a little bit of borrowed time with that. You add in the variability of Kevin Durant, and his availability has been the best it could be post a horrific injury. But this team it's not like this team just opened a brand new window. I would say they jammed something in
I'd agree with that.
To keep this championship window from closing. So it's not like they're playing with house money. Like if they lost in the first round, it would be and granted, I'm a Clippers fan, so you can say this is biased or whatever, but I think, given where both teams are at, given what the Suns have given up to go ahead and get Durant, if they were to flame out in the first round of playoffs against an injured or at least partially injured Clippers
huge.
team, I don't know how you come back from that, and I don't know how you get around that or excuse that away.
That's a fair call.
Especially how they exited the playoffs last year. I would say this is the one good thing for the Clippers being where they're at right now. It can really only go up, right? Like they end up getting bounced in 6 or 7 games in the first round. It's a bummer. Hey, man, like this season, it wasn't great, not making excuses, but like this isn't exactly a completely unprecedented outcome.
Right. It's not a 2-7 matchup. We're not losing.
Yeah, the Suns to make a dramatic swing to try and basically ensure that they can win a title in the next year or two. I mean, that's a massive blow to them. Like that's a massive, massive loss.
I can see it that way, but I still think if the Clippers lost, they would have more questions and more uncertainty heading into the offseason than the Suns, who would just say, oh, we needed more time on the court and we're going to run it back because they don't really have any other option. Where the Clippers would likely, I don't know, some people might say blow it up.
I was going to say that's been the Clippers situation the last couple of years is, well, we just needed more time. We're not practicing. Guys have been hurt. Like, that's true. It's the starting of their we don't have enough time arc for Phoenix.
But KD's going to turn 35, I think, coming up here soon. You mentioned the age of Chris Paul. He's not getting any younger. So, look, there's pressure on both sides, but the Clippers clearly are the underdog. I think the Phoenix Suns are something like a minus 650 to win this series. You bet 650 to make 100. I do like in some ways the Clippers being back in this position where they feel like they're not supposed to be here in some ways. They're going up against a juggernaut because they've played loose and free and big in those moments in the past.
Yeah, the playing free thing is great that you just mentioned. I think Westbrook's going to be great for that. Just to have that freedom to kind of, I know this sounds stupid, run around. Like the Suns guards and their personnel, they're not going to outpace us like the Kings, like you talked about, right? Like this, we have some guards who can make them tired out. They're running around. If they're crashing the boards, like I think that's a great way to chip away at that pressure. And I think I maybe have flipped to Will's side now that the Suns have more pressure too. I'm going
to flip to that side too, because that's a more positive spin. And that's what I'm here for.
Where are we thinking? Oh, go ahead.
The pace numbers to end the season. Clippers 21st in pace, Suns 22nd.
There we go.
The Clippers post All-Star break playing a little bit faster than the Suns in that area. I think it's 14-17. But there are stylistically advantages to taking on the Phoenix Suns instead of the Sacramento Kings.
Absolutely. All right, so of the 2 games that are going to be in Phoenix, we know one of them is on Sunday. Not sure what time that is yet. Do you think that's the Clippers' best chance to steal one of the games in Phoenix? Do you think it's game 1 where it's just shot in the mouth? Hope your top 4 guys are ready because our top 1 minus Paul George and everyone else is good to go. Do you think it's game 1?
Probably. It usually is for a team in the position that the Clippers are, down their second best player on the road, taking on a team that obviously, as we just outlined, has all the pressure on them in the Phoenix Suns to come out and play great right away. My best guess is in those first 2 games in Phoenix, one of them is going to be really close that the Clippers have to find a way to win, and the other is going to be Phoenix winning by double digits. That's my guess.
Okay. Will, do you think Rocco's going to come in and make some things happen in game 1?
I don't know. It's not impossible. I was also, this is just one thing that I've been thinking about too, is completely different scenario, but I'm thinking about 18-19. when the Clippers, a much less star-studded Clippers team, took on the Warriors, and they played Durant great through 2 first games.
Yeah.
I don't.
Through
He
2
didn't
first
hit.
games, yes.
He had 23 and 21 points. Clippers end up splitting the series. They win one there at Oracle, and I just think that so this is. It's not like this is a player that hasn't been scouted before, right? Like it's not like a player that
Right.
teams,
He's just unstoppable when he's feeling it.
Yeah, that teams haven't found ways to sort of orient around. And that was a much more complete Warriors team in my eyes than this current Suns team is, and a much more deficient Clippers team in terms of
I like this. I see where this is going.
In terms of what this Clippers team, even down Paul George, is. So I think that it's possible for them to split this series on the road. I do think one is probably the best game to go. But yeah, I'm excited to see what we can kind of throw out there. And then conversely, what the adjustment is going to be from game 1 to game 2 on the road. I think that's going to be really exciting to watch. And yeah, I'm not sure what the big curveball is for game 1. If Ty Lue has something up the sleeve,
Moses Brown.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, you would think you would think there would be some more 5-out stuff involved. I would expect Mason Plumlee's role to diminish,
Agreed.
but I don't know. I'm curious to see what we think that ace in the hole is, and then ultimately how we adjust to however the Suns are able to counter that in game 2.
The 5-out thing is really interesting too, because the 5-out lineup, as much as we've all wanted it, has not been very good this year for the Clippers. I'm not sure if it's been put out in 100% good faith by Ty in some instances, but I think the 5-out lineup is going to be the adjustment in game 2. I think you're totally right about that. I think Plumlee's spot in the rotation is not a coin flip, but pretty close, because we saw what happened this weekend, right? It's not good defense.
If you're a guard or you're Mason Plumlee, if I'm a guard, I'm feeling a lot better about my playing time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's an interesting point, though. Are we finally going to get Wingstop? Because Will brought up the series last year.
There's no Morris and Rocco doesn't play, so I don't literally think we can have Wingstop.
We all said they're going to ride Morris the rest of the season, and they didn't. And everybody thinking that they're not going to play Rocco because they haven't for the most part, and he's gotten so many DMPs. I think Coach Lue might go to it. I think Rocco's going to play in this series. I think.
Do we have to be down 0-2 for that to happen?
I don't think so. I think he's going to play in one of the first 2 games. I think he's going to get a look, because Will brought it up, that series against the Boston Celtics last season where they got swept the Nets and KD was awful and Kyrie was awful. I don't think Robert Williams was available to play yet. Now, they didn't have a DeAndre Ayton out there, so you may want to go 4 wings with Big Zoo, and it could be different in that way. But Kevin Durant got frustrated because they had a ton of guys out there with length and they were shrinking the floor on him.
Don't we only have 4 wings though? We only, you know what I mean?
Okay, Man, Kawhi, Batum. Are we counting Man? Rocco.
Sure. There's 4.
Amir Coffee, baby.
Right. We have 3.5 wings.
But that's 4 you can play next to Zubas. I don't know if you want to go 5 out if DeAndre Ayton is on the floor. Or Landale, who's been a Clipper killer.
Don't even get me started on Jock. Jock destroys it. I hate
Bismack is back.
Basketball. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So series predictions. Will Updike. These cannot change. No, these can change. What's your series prediction? Monday, April 10th, 6:03 p.m. Pacific Standard.
No PG. I think it's probably Suns, but I do think the Clippers have a better shot than a lot of people are giving them. I'm gonna go. It's Suns probably ultimately take it, but it's gonna take them 7 games, and it's not gonna be pretty.
Love it. All right, hell yeah, Adam.
It's not gonna be pretty for people in Phoenix. Damn straight. Clips and 6, boys. I got
6?
Clips and 6.
Whoa!
Look, if they're gonna win this series, as bad as the
gotta be
Suns
in
were in
six.
that, as bad as the Suns were at home in that Game 7 against Dallas last season, I don't foresee any performance happening like that in a must-win game. I think the Clippers got to beat them and close them out at Crypto.com. So Clips in 6.
Clips in 6 it is. Man, that just hyped me up. I'm gonna go
Chuck is going Clips in 5.
Clips in 5. I'm going clean sweep. Marcus is back in the starting lineup in the Clippers sweep. I'm gonna go. I gotta go Suns in 7. I'm stealing Will's take or a pick. It just.
Guys, this is the Clips and Dip podcast. What are we doing?
I know it's the Clips and Dip podcast. I want them to win. I'm just there's a small part of my brain that is rational. It's already a very small part of my brain that won't allow me just yet. Again, Monday, April 10th, 6:05 p.m. As of now, PG not in the series in this call for me. Suns in 7. If PG comes back, Clippers, and I don't care how many, but I think the Clippers win if PG comes back at some point.
I don't know if you guys paid attention to this, but Eric Gordon was locking up Devin Booker in that game right before the All-Star break. I'm just saying.
Right before I missed that one. Okay, so who is our surprise performer of the series picks? This is what people want to know about. I will actually tweet these out, unlike the one that I missed, which Adam pointed out. We all three got the surprise performer right last time. You picked Norm, I picked Terrence, and Adam, I think, picked
No, I had Norm. Will had Bones.
But I had Terrence
on the 4th.
Yeah, we pretty much nailed it. So, Adam, I'll go to you. Who is your surprise performer of the series pick for the Clippers in your scenario? A 6-game series win.
I'm going to go back to what I said about Terrence Mann having to be one of the top 3 best guys on offense. I think that would be a surprise for a lot of people. Terrence Mann, arise, young man. It is time. They need him now more than ever. They don't need 39, but around 15 a game. Maybe one of those games, but around 15 a game. Consistent, good shooting from the outside. If they win this series because of his defense too, he can guard Booker, he can guard KD, he can guard CP3. Hell, he'll be on Ayton probably at some point. He's that good. He could swing the series in the Clippers' favor should he play his best basketball of his young career.
All right, Will?
Man, I guess there's one answer. It's the man who knows more about basketball than any NBA player on the earth. Mr. Roundball Rock head himself, Eric Gordon.
That's a great pick. Only because of his head shape, or do you want to give any player comps or?
Look, I just think that it's kind of like I said in the offensive thing on the Norm thing. I think that the floor for Gordon for what he can do defensively is the peaks and valleys are much more evened out. I think if he could average 18 to 20 in this series, I think the Clippers, I would change my pick from Suns in 7 to Clippers in 7.
Damn.
So change it.
I was like, so just pick the Clippers. That's very funny. So I feel like Norm can't be a surprise performer of the night because he's just, we know he has to be very
of the series, right?
Of the series, excuse me. Yeah, of the series. I gotta go, and I want you guys to let me know if this doesn't count either. Zoo averaging, let's call it 17 and like 12.
I'm good with that because I think a lot of people.
Is that a surprise though? Because he's in the starting 5. If it's
it would surprise people nationally for sure.
I'm going. Well, yeah, or it's either between Zoo and Bones, but I don't know if Bones will get a full series to show. You know what I mean? Like he's gonna get the hot hand, but Zoo's always gonna be out there, like to start. You know what I mean? Like.
Adam, what's your net prediction for the T-Bones backcourt? What do you got? What are you thinking? Plus 10 net?
Okay, obviously,
net, and then there's net.
What it's all about DIH, dog in him,
dog in percentage. Thank you. I've been preaching that for the last like 2 weeks.
And a guy with the name Bones got a lot of dog in him. He's got dog wrapped around the bones. those two, I mean, it's a great point because in theory, the Clippers have the bench advantage by a wide margin.
In theory, in practice.
And the only reason we haven't talked about it is just because we don't know how short this rotation is going to end up being. Like I feel like when after game one, we can probably give you some more detailed information on what that's going to be like. But yeah,
Totally,
I'm just interested in your raw prediction.
Bones, T-Man, I'll say their net, so that's per 100 possessions, is a +8.
I like it. Will, we were talking
Nothing
about
crazy.
If T-Bones has a big game in the series, we have to do a podcast where we're all eating T-bone steaks in our respective.
Absolutely. Are you kidding me? Yeah,
let's
no
do
question.
it. We should find a steakhouse to sponsor us. We could do a little live podcast recording. And who doesn't want to listen to a podcast while three guys eat steaks? So this week we got some great shows. We're going to do a playoff mailbag episode on Wednesday. So send in your playoff questions. Only playoff questions. That's all we're going to be answering. We got a poll going up right now for surprise performer of the series. It's getting a lot of votes right now. Terrence and Zoo are tied. Will, people for some reason are not respecting Eric Gordon's head size on this poll. We're going to have a pregame pod on Friday as well. A double dip after game one on Sunday. Going to try and find some guests to come on at some point this week too. Carl Tart, also for you people out there wondering, bought a Russell Westbrook jersey, which either means he's off the team in 2 weeks, a la John Wall, or he's here forever, a la Terrence Mann. So we'll see.
Can I tell you guys a quick story of a caller I got the other night, last night on Clippers Talk?
Yes.
So this guy
with a story.
This guy Tages in Walnut, he was a regular. He hadn't called in about 2 months, and he would call in after every Clippers game. I had a little bit of concern. What's going on with Tages? Where's he been? He calls in and explains the reason he hadn't been able to call in was because his father, also a Clippers fan, had a heart attack during the season.
Shit.
Now he's okay. He's okay.
Right. Shout out Papa
And they
Tages.
gave him like a teddy bear, and I think he named it like Clippers Bear or something like that. So he's on the recovery, and he's rooting for the Clippers. He's on the mend, and they got to do it for him. And
for Papa Tages.
Yeah, he didn't give his dad's name, but I don't know. It was the Clippers fans are. I think there's more than 29 or 27 or whatever the joke is that people would make. Sure. That's very unoriginal. They are everywhere.
All right. They know what they got to do. They got to do it for Papa Tages. We were going to have this episode up on YouTube. Thank you to everyone for listening to us. You can find us Spotify, Deezer, iTunes, all those fantastic places. We'll be back for you on Wednesday. Send your questions into @ClippersPod or comment on the YouTube with your questions. That's a fun time. Until then, hey, let's all try and relax and let's go Clips.